Simbis are, it's a broad category of spirits. There is no just one type of Simbi. As you'll learn in this video, there are many types, but I want to focus on Simbis here in America. So, like I said, it is a subject that is very sacred. If you look out here today at some of the information available about Simbis, usually what you'll find is something in the context of magic, where the Simbi is viewed like a genie in a bottle, and you make a wish and, it's there to serve at your command, which is, to me, very disrespectful. And we need to do our best to claim our spiritual heritage, to put some respect back on the Simbis, because as you'll see, they are very important to our people, our history, and even to us today. So Simbis, according to our African ancestors, Simbis are the guardians of the land. They're sacred because they are both in the spiritual realm and the physical world. So they straddle the line of Kalunga on the cosmogram. Our ancient African ancestors believed the Simbi spirits to be very old people who do not die. So how did they get over here to America? So in my research, I seen the account where some of our ancestors stated that the Simbi took on the form of little children and came through the Middle Passage with our ancestors to America. When they got here and they got around some of the waterways, they went back to their Simbi forms, and they went into some of these waterways and made it their habitat, and they dwell there ever since. Now, oral tradition, I've heard that some of the ancestors, when they got over here to America, they were concerned because they didn't have a connection, an ancestral connection to this land. And it goes back to an old Congo proverb, which states that where your ancestors did not lie, you cannot build a home. So they needed an ancestral connection to this land. And it's my understanding from oral tradition that many of the elders at that time sacrificed themselves to become that spiritual tie to this land. Our ancestors, when we look at the description of a Simbi, they state that a Simbi is the size of whatever it inhabits. When it comes to water, like a spring or a river, however big that river or spring or creek is, that's how big that Simbi is. Now, most of the time when we look at Simbi's depictions today, it's usually the mermaid, half woman, half fish. But a Simbi could actually take on the body, the full body of a person. They could be a snake, such as a python or viper. They could very well be a bird. They could be a twisted tree. And if you'll notice in Hoodoo, our ancestors held high spiritual significance to certain birds, such as crows and owls and ravens. Snakes in Hoodoo are revered. Trees in Hoodoo is revered. And these were all things that a Simbi could take form of. They could also be in the form of a gourd. They could be in the form of a spark of fire, which is the total opposite of the mermaid that we often see today. So a Simbi can take many forms. And as far as their color, usually we show them as blue today, but actually our African ancestors state that they can be green, they can be red, they can be black, they could be spotted, they could be any of these colors. We do also know from our ancestors that they are very territorial. They inhabit rocks, gullies, streams, pools, rivers, and wherever their habitat is, they influence that surrounding area, which is why our ancestors went out of their way to appease the local Simbis, to be cautious around their habitats, to provide them offerings, to be at peace with them. Because if the Simbi is at peace and is okay with them, then it will bless that area. It will bless their crops. It will bless their fishing. It will bless their communities and their families. And there could be, their needs could be met. So they are very territorial and confined to a territory. But they can bring trouble if they're not respected, which is why our ancestors really kind of tiptoed, around them, was very careful. They could also become twins or children, according to our ancestors. So they could even, change their shape to children or twins. Now, we do have two accounts I've noted of Simbis, according to our ancestors' eyewitness account. There was a young enslaved boy at the Pushi plantation, which we'll talk about later in this meeting, who late one night went out to collect water from a local spring. And he got to the spring and he seen a Simbi dancing around that spring. So of course he ran. He just ran back to, the house. And then in another account, looking at what a Simbi looked like, the Simbi was described as being a woman with very, very long hair covering her face. And almost all of the accounts say that a Simbi has web feet. So that is some of the description of a Simbi. And that's why I say, I just wonder sometimes the similarities of this character in the movie to what our ancestors described, how they described a Simbi looked. So let's look at how a Simbi operates. So it was considered bad luck if you seen a Simbi and you told about it. You were supposed to wait a while before you even spoke of your encounter with the Simbi, or tragic things will happen to you. Also, sinkholes such as you see here, springs, creeks, rivers, our ancestors say that they only appear because of the presence of a Simbi. So when it wasn't there and it suddenly appears, that is a sure sign of a presence of a Simbi. But when that sinkhole, when that river, when that stream dries up, that means the Simbi has left that habitat. Now we know under our earth there are many hidden underground streams, underground lakes, underground ancient rivers, even ancient oceans. And when these dry up, it is said that sinkholes like this appear. And that's because there was water somewhere in the vicinity underground, and it was the habitat of a Simbi. And when the Simbi left, this is what happens. This is just a small natural spring that, you'll see these in the South. They tend to pop up and then they'll, dry up. It's said if anyone disturbs the water, disturbs the spring, that the Simbi will become angry. And in some accounts during slavery, our great-great-great-grandmothers working on the plantations had to wash their clothes, their family's clothes, late at night because they had to do the work for the plantation during the day. So they would have to do their washing at the spring or at the creek, late at night. And they would always go in groups because they feared seeing a Simbi, feared being out there by that water by themselves. So they would always go in a group and they would sing. And sometimes they would be singing and praying while they were washing those clothes in that water. And that was to calm and appease the Simbi in that water. So if they heard anything, any kind of startling sound, growl or anything, they would run for their life. That's how much our ancestors feared the Simbis. But also in Hoodoo, there is a uncrossing work where if you wanted to get rid of a Hoodoo work, you would walk backwards to the water and you would throw it over your shoulder, say some sort of a bottle, mojo, some sort of work that has been cursed or something you want to deactivate. You will walk backwards to the water and throw it over your shoulder. And the reason we do that is because you don't want to see the spirit of that water. You don't want to see a Simbi. When you throw something in that water, the Simbi is going to become angry. And it's going to take whatever you threw in that water and destroy it, which is why we do it in Hoodoo. But it also highlights how Simbis play a role in Hoodoo beliefs. And also, you'll notice I stated in my videos and in my books how if you want to deactivate something, you throw it in a natural body of water. Once again, you're throwing it in that water. The Simbi is going to not like that and is going to take whatever is thrown and destroy it. And that, like I said, that's what we want. So there's a lot of correlations between water and Simbis in Hoodoo. So our ancestors feared Simbis and took great care in working around their habitats. So throughout the South are many springs, many waterways that Simbis inhabit. Lake Moultrie in the Carolinas is one such place. Before there was a Lake Moultrie, there was land. There was plantations like Pooshie and Woodboo. And on these plantations were lots of little springs. There was little swampy areas. There was creeks that were inhabited by Simbi. And our ancestors talked about these. So we know from their accounts that the presence of Simbis was in the areas, but they created Lake Moultrie and those plantations today. That whole area is underwater, and Lake Moultrie is a big lake. What you're seeing here is just a small little inlet off of that lake, and it's a little swampy area. But Lake Moultrie is the spirit of a Simbi. The spirit of the Simbi that was in those springs when Lake Moultrie was created. That Simbi became big because remember, a Simbi is the size of the water it inhabits. So it is a massive spirit of a Simbi there at Lake Moultrie. And that is a place that you can go and give offerings to the Simbi. Now let's look at another place. Lake Lanier in Georgia. You probably heard about it. It's an area that used to be a Black area of our ancestors. Oscarville and I think a couple of other little towns was in this area. And the officials decided that they wanted to flood that whole area and create Lake Lanier. And in those townships, there were springs, there were creeks, there was the spirit of a Simbi. So when they flooded that area, that Simbi, just like at Lake Moultrie, grew in size. But this one is really vicious. And I think it's because of all of our ancestors' bones that still lay at the bottom of that lake. Remnants of communities, remnants of life at the bottom of that lake. The officials disturbed the habitat of this Simbi, and it angered it. So that whole area is just pretty much cursed. And you've heard of the different happenings on Lake Lanier. And I've watched several videos of our people who went to that lake, almost drowned, but experienced some sort of force taking them out of the water to the shore, leading them to safety. And I truly believe that that was the Simbi in that lake having compassion on them, but it typically doesn't. So Lake Lanier has a very large and angry Simbi water spirit there. So instead of people going there to be nosy and just kind of gawk and look at the lake, our people should go there and actually give offerings to that Simbi and give libations to all of our ancestors' bones who are still at the bottom of that lake. Let's move on to another place that is known to have the spirit of a Simbi, and that's the Devil's Punch Bowl in Natchez, Mississippi. And this is right on the Mississippi River. Now, this location has extra significance. This one is pretty fascinating. The Devil's Punch Bowl is a natural bowl-shaped formation, cliff formation, right on the edge of the Mississippi River at Natchez. After emancipation, a lot of our ancestors in the southern Mississippi at the plantations wanted to get the heck out of there. So they started en masse migrating north. And a lot of them went to Natchez because Natchez was a wealthy white town, one of the wealthiest in the nation at that time, old money. And it was a small population. I think it was less than 2,000. I could be wrong, but it was a very small population. But this migration of our ancestors was by the thousands. So suddenly their town was invaded, was surrounded by all of these former slaves looking for work, looking, and some of them, passing through, trying to go even further north. And I believe my family was part of that migration that arrived up into Northwest Alabama. But those wealthy elites in that town, they didn't like this. They were outnumbered by former slaves. So they called on the Union soldiers to take care of the situation. Pretty much, this is your problem. You created this. Now you clean it up. Do something with all of these former enslaved people. So the Union soldiers took all of our ancestors, thousands of them, some accounts say 20,000, to the Devil's Punch Bowl. The plan was supposed to be to provide work to the men at nearby former plantations, to provide schools for the children, medicine, food, and water, and build housing for those slaves there in that encampment. None of that happened. They didn't provide water. They didn't provide food. The men were forced to work in the camp. There was illness, yellow fever, I believe malaria, I think, which took many lives. Most of the people starved to death. They put the women and the children in one area. No water, no food, and they just starved to death and wouldn't let them leave. Wouldn't let them leave because they didn't want those former slaves roaming around that wealthy area. So thousands of our ancestors died there. And as they died, they were told wherever someone died, our people just had to bury them on the spot. So in the Devil's Punch Bowl, it's thousands upon thousands of our ancestors' bones, people who were basically killed, starved to death, no water or disease, or it was just horrible. So whenever the Mississippi River floods into the Devil's Punch Bowl, some of those bones loosen up from the soil and flow out into the Mississippi. And it's also said that just a whole crop of wild peach trees grow in that Devil's Punch Bowl, but no one dare touches or eats those peaches because they're cursed. They're growing on the bones of our ancestors in that location. So that itself is significant. Deep ancestral ties to the Devil's Punch Bowl. But the Mississippi River that flows right beside it, like I said, when sometimes the Mississippi River will flood up into that Devil's Punch Bowl and loosen up those ancestor bones. That is, the Mississippi River is a Simbi. There is a water spirit, massive. Remember, the Simbi is the size of the water that it habitates, and the Mississippi is huge. That is one vast Simbi. And the fact that it pulls out our ancestors' bones so that we never forget is just simply amazing. The fact that, man with all of his science, all of his technology, tries to block the Mississippi River here and there to make it go this way or that way, where it wants to go. They can't. Mississippi always finds a way to go where it wants to go. That is the spirit of a Simbi in that water. So for the Mississippi River, another location that has ancestral ties and that has a massive spirit of a Simbi. And it's a location where you would want to give offerings to the river spirit, and where you would want to give libations to all of our ancestors who are buried all through along the Mississippi River, not only the Devil's Punch Bowl, but specifically here. Now, the Devil's Punch Bowl is owned by a family. It's private property, so you can't really freely go on it, but you can see it from the road. You can do libations from the road. And to be honest, I don't think you would want to go into there because there's a lot of traumatized spirits there. That's not a good place to go. You definitely don't want to take anything out of the Devil's Punch Bowl because it's going to be cursed. So I wanted to show you these popular locations. And of course, there are many, many more. In your own area, you have the presence of a Simbi in some of the waterways. You just do your research and see what rivers are near you, what creeks, what springs, natural bodies of water is near you. And there will be a Simbi. So, one of the things growing up, and I've realized anytime we do a baptism in the river, anytime we do a hoodoo cleansing with the river or the spring or the natural body of water, we always sing. We're always praying. And to me, that is appeasing that water spirit. And like I said in a previous video, and I think in my books too, before we started doing baptisms for Christianity, we were actually doing baptisms with the water spirit to cleanse us, to heal us, to remove negative things off us, to remove curses off of us. But like I said, our ancestors would always approach the water in prayer and singing, and that was to appease that water spirit, the Simbi, because our ancestors knew that, the local Simbi, like I said earlier, that is their territory, the surrounding community, the surrounding land, the surrounding waterways. They could make or break an area. And our ancestors wanted those successful crops, success in their communities, free of disease. So they always appeased the water spirits, the Simbi, their nearby Simbi. They always wanted to have that good relationship with them. That is how the land is tied to us spiritually through the Simbi. So we today have to rediscover those connections. We need to rebuild those connections. And we want to have good relationships with the Simbi. What that means is you've got to go give offerings, give honor, sing or pray at that water. You don't have to pray to the Simbi, but go and humble yourself in the presence of the Simbi. And you've got to do this many, many times. And eventually, that water spirit, that Simbi, will find favor with you, will find favor with the surrounding area. I witnessed that, experienced it at Sandy Beach. We gave offerings to that water, not looking for anything in return. We just did it because we wanted to. We wanted to give, honor to the local water spirit. And that's why the water spirit came ashore and graced me with their presence, offering that moment of peace and serenity, which was beautiful. So this is what we want to be mindful of when we think about Simbis. It's not about magic. It's not about having the Simbi do things for us. You don't control the Simbi. You never will. Let me tell you, you never can command a Simbi to do anything for you. You can try to appease it and find favor. That's what you can do. So family, I hope that this information has been helpful to you and that it encourages you to find out more about your local waterways, your springs, your creeks, your rivers, and find out the history and see, give offerings to your local Simbi and give libations to any of the ancestral bones that might still be, around that Simbi's area. So thank you so much for taking time to watch this video. Like I said, we need to make that connection with the Simbi, not looking for something in return, but just to honor them. So thank you, family. I really appreciate your interest in traditional Hoodoo. So I will see you in the next Hoodoo camp meeting. Until then, have a powerful and super great journey.